Is Dungeons & Dragons losing momentum? This was a question posed by Zack the Bold a few days ago in a video, and he gave his own opinions on it. I want to take a marketing approach to this using keyword research. This is a tool I've used to help clients decide what to create next, what kind of topics to cover, and help predict the trends that are driving the market forward. And I'm going to be using completely free tools to show you how you can do this. And we're only going to need 2 tools to get us started. So the first thing, to answer our question, is Dungeons & Dragons losing momentum? You're going to want to go to Keyword Planner in Google Ads. You'll have to create a Google Ads account. You don't have to pay for anything. I haven't paid for anything. You just have to go about creating the account. So I have a Google Ads account. I'm on the Keyword Planner. All right. You'll go to Discover New Keywords. To help us figure out exactly, is Dungeons & Dragons losing momentum, I've selected some keywords that we're going to put in here. So first, we're going to do some generic D&D keywords. I'm going to pop those into the Keyword Planner. All right. Press Enter. So from here, to kind of explain what we're seeing here, this is the keyword, and it's going to start with what I gave it. It's then going to start giving me suggestions like D&D Beyond, D&D Dice, D&D Online. This is a great way to see what is in your set that you're searching for and what's really popular. The average monthly searches is just that. It's an average monthly search. So if something says between 10K and 100K, that's pretty broad. Same thing with 100K and 1 million. That's very broad. And it might be hard in this unpaid version to see the trend line. In a paid version, you can see the trend line, but we're working free today. I'm going to show you how you can skirt around that with the next tool, which is trends. All right, I've gone ahead and preloaded the highest 100K to 1 million, 100K to 1 million, and what is Dungeons and Dragons. I pulled these keywords out, all right, and I put them into trends for us, all right. This is set to the past 12 months. So the first thing you'll see is that for the blue one, which is just the term D&D, it's got much higher search volume on average, and it's averaging, according to Keyword Planner, at a little under 100 in the past 12 months, whereas D&D with the ampersand is averaging at like 10. All right, and you'll also notice that there's no downside. Now, real quick exploration of the Google Trends, it'll also tell you a bit of density around certain keywords based on state. Okay, you can also, let's take a look at these very generic, how is Dungeons & Dragons performing over the past 5 years. And once again, you'll see for these broad Dungeons & Dragons keywords, you'll actually see that it's on a pretty steady plateau with maybe a mild decline happening right around here. That might be seasonal though, because you'll see that sort of decline happens over and over and over again, and we should expect a dip right around here, all right, and we should expect a lift somewhere at the beginning or end of the year, and sometimes in the mid-year, where you'll see right here, it's July, and over here you had July as a peak, August, July is a peak. So this may just be general market behavior. You can also help yourself see certain trend lines a little better if you take out your overperformers. All right, and then you can compare your underperformers a little more accurately by the eye. All right, and you can see things like D&D, all right, the ones who use the ampersand were almost 5 times as popular 5 years ago versus now. You can also see the Dungeons & Dragons had quite a spike, the full type out in March, April of 2023, and has since fizzled out. And what is Dungeons & Dragons gets very, very little, if any, traffic whatsoever. So now that we know what these tools are and what they're saying, let's dig a little further into it. So we don't see necessarily a slump in generic D&D, but what about how the consumers in D&D are behaving? The people who, for example, might use some accessories. They might be shopping. All right, we're going to go back to our Keyword Planner, clear the board, pop these in, and see what we got. All right. So again, you'll see, you can also look over here at the 3-month and year-over-year change. You'll notice that according to Google's data, There's not a lot of change. D&D miniatures are doing less good this 3 months than last 3 months. That might be interesting to you. Metal D&D dice are not doing nearly as well this year than they were last year. This will help you predict trends, but today we're just looking at the overall slump. So I'm going to take the highest performers here, starting with D&D dice. That's a good 10K. D&D maps, that's a good 10K. Let's grab 2 more that I'm interested in. All right, so let's start by putting D&D dice over there in our Google Trends. I also know we had D&D maps. All right, let's grab another one here. I want to see how D&D gift ideas are doing. And I think that something more in the weeds like D&D miniatures will help us understand the market a little bit better. I believe with this tool you can go up to 5. Okay, so looking at the 5-year trend. All right, again, we'll see some seasonal slumping and rising, and perhaps a mild decline from here in 2023. I see like a little sloping down. You have a bottom trough right here, and the bottom trough over here is getting lower and lower each year for D&D dice in particular. That could indicate to us a downward trend in the market. Let's go ahead and take out this overperformer real quick. And now let's compare D&D maps, gift ideas, and miniatures. Here you'll actually see that the trough's getting higher, all right, and the peaks are remaining steady. So for this area, for D&D maps, D&D minis, you'll see that there's a steady increase, or at least a plateau. And you'll see that gift ideas only come around Christmas. So that should be no surprise at all. All right. Now let's keep going. So what we discovered there was D&D dice might be on a downward trend. That seemed to be very clear in the data. What about people who are using tools like DriveThruRPG, DM's Guild, Roll20? Let's see how they're behaving. Oops. Erase, add, enter. All right, so you can check your year over year and 3-month change. You'll see that there's no there. All right. Let's grab the most performers here. Roll20 is doing great. Let's grab that. And then we'll also put in D&D Beyond. Roll20, D&D. Did I put D&D Beyond with or without a space? That kind of stuff matters in this research. It's without a space. D&D Beyond. I always forget to press enter when I put these in. Roll20 was the other overperformers we had here. Who else ended in 1 million? Nobody? Okay, great. Let's do DriveThruRPG. And what was the other one with 10K down here? D&D Online. Let's do that one. DriveThruRPG and D&D Online. Excellent. So we have a couple of clear overperformers. Roll20, D&D Beyond. I love how D&D Beyond gave a real sag here in 2023. And it started climbing itself back up, but Roll20 is actually doing, on average, better than D&D Beyond, which is very surprising to me. But let's go back to what we're looking here. Are we slowing down? So let's see. Around 2021, we're at about 40s, 50s. We move up to 50s, 60s. We're going down in 2023 to 40s and 20s. And we're kind of steadying out there, slight up into the 30s, especially for D&D Beyond. So what we can see here is maybe a downward slope, but it seems to be balancing out. And you look at where we were in 2021, we definitely D&D Beyond took a hit in 2023, but it seems to be catching up with itself. But it's nowhere near the hype it was in 2022. That is the kind of gap we can see measuring. Down here, we're in the 34, maxing out at 50 about, whereas over here, we're maxing out at about 70. All right, so that's a pretty substantial decrease. So there's another potential trend line we can say is answering Zack the Bolt's question, is it losing momentum? But let's keep going. D&D alternatives. One of the things that we might want to look at if D&D is losing momentum is, are other alternatives gaining momentum? Are players who play D&D on the regular switching? All right. That would tell us a lot about whether or not D&D is losing momentum, or the bigger question, if TTRPGs are losing momentum. So I put in some of the major competitors here: Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu, Warhammer, which I expect to do very well in this research. All right. And it's telling us, well, GURPS may not be doing very well this year. Let's go ahead and grab Warhammer, a great competitor here. All right, let's also put in Pathfinder 2E. Enter Pathfinder. And I'm going to, again, I have to ask, was it a space or a not space? It was a space. That stuff matters in this research. Pathfinder 2E. Just like you saw the difference between D in D versus D and D in research, having a space versus not having a space makes a huge difference. All right, let's grab in Call of Cthulhu, and we'll do Vampire the Masquerade. Nope, that was not what I wanted. I wanted Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu. Let's grab Vampire. And just because I'm really feeling it, let's throw Shadowrun in there as well. Now, unfortunately, I don't think we have enough data in to figure out if Daggerheart is a major competitor yet. We're going to have to wait a couple of months for the searches to come in, for Google to analyze that data, incorporate it, and put it into something like this. All right, so first we're going to have to look at our outlier. Warhammer is just absolutely slaying over here over the past 5 years. You can also see, though, its trend line is upward, but it's not crazy upward, even though it started to get real big right here in mid 2024. Let's go ahead and remove our overperformer here so that we can better take a look at this data. Okay, so here you'll see Pathfinder 2E definitely saw a spike in 2023, which was around where we were seeing the D&D stuff rising, was 2023. So 2023 was a rise for TTRPGs in general. We can see at least it was for Pathfinder, and there's a lot of stuff happening there, so it doesn't surprise me. And then Pathfinder has just not capitalized on that momentum. It has not been able to hold on. It's still, right now, it's plateauing at about where it was in 2022, which, granted, is about twice as good as it was in 2021. But you can see from here, what we definitely aren't seeing is, are people dropping off D&D and moving over to Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu, Vampire, Shadowrun? That does not appear to be happening. So it's not necessarily that D&D could be in a slump, but that TTRPGs could be in a slump. And the keywords we were looking at, D&D, dice, art, and all these, those affect a lot of TTRPGs, even though they have D&D specifically in the title, because D&D is the standard TTRPG. A lot of searchers would use that. Let's see how people are changing their media consumption habits, if at all. This would also tell us how the general interest in D&D is shaping over time. All right, so all of these keywords that I put in, nothing standing out in the 3-month or the year over year. Let's go ahead and just take D&D podcast. Put that over here. Enter. Let's take Dungeons and Dragons podcast. Put that over here. And let's grab, what do we like? These are all really low. Good D&D podcast, funny D&D podcast. All right, let's just compare these. We'll add in best. Why not? All right, throw that in there. Enter, and let's remove Shadowrun. So it looks like D&D podcast is the only one really worth looking at here. So let's go ahead and remove these underperformers. All right. Now, here's what's interesting. So we've seen a slight dip in certain things like dice and general D&D keywords. But for D&D podcasts, over the past 5 years, it also saw that bump around this was in 2022 and 2023, but it has maintained the level of interest. This right here would be a negative to our theory of is it slumping? Is it, as Zack the Bold put it, losing momentum? This shows a maintaining of momentum, maybe around here a slight dip, but again, that could be a seasonal dip. So there is a counterpoint in that, and is why we look at this from so many angles. All right, we got a couple more we're going to look at. We're going to look at actual play and conventions. All right, I wish we had more data, and I'll talk about that in a moment, because there's a lot that we're not able to look at here, and a lot we're not going to be able to look at until the end of the year. All right, so it pulled the keywords we provided and basically said the only ones worth looking at is D&D actual play. All right, so we're just going to pop that one keyword in. And what we're learning here is that basically this keyword isn't important enough to Google or to searchers to be having a lot of data, so this one's just a flop, and that's okay. Moving on to conventions. I picked some conventions that I think are generally D&D focused or TTRPG focused, plus Origins Game Fair, because I go to that one. All right, let's go ahead and pull that in. All right, so we see like Gary Con went down in 3 months. That makes sense. Origins going down year over year. That kind of makes sense too. Let's just pull in Gen Con, Dragon Con, and Gary Con and D&D conventions. Okay, so here we have Gen Con, Dragon Con, Gary Con, and D&D conventions. And we're going to see heavy seasonality here, I think, because, yeah, a lot of people are only searching them as they go. So let's... Jesus, Gen Con is such an overperformer in this. Gary Con and Dragon Con. We're going to remove Gen Con, and we're going to come back to it and just look at it all on its own. So you can look at these peaks. All right, with Gary Con is our red, okay? And you'll see that the peaks are getting smaller every year. That might be just for this convention, but it serves as a potential indicator that Dungeons & Dragons is indeed losing momentum. Let's go ahead and remove Gary Con as an overperformer and see if D&D conventions and Dragon Con do anything. So Dragon Con, the peaks are pretty much the same. D&D conventions just pop up. It's irrelevant for our research. So that didn't give us an indicator. The only one that's giving us a real indicator is Gary Con so far. Let's look at Gen Con, and let's do Gen Con in two different ways. Gen Con without a space and Gen Con with a space, just to give us more broad. All right, looks like red Gen Con with no space overperforms, so let's remove blue. Okay, so now Gen Con, it looks from this one, all right, you can see that it saw the 2023 bump, a big rise from its 2022, and 2024 was lower, but still higher than 2022. So this one's a kind of middling, but you could indicate this as a clear, it was up here, it's now down here. It was in the hundreds, it's now in the 75, like 80-ish. All right, that we could call that a maybe 20% decline. All right, and so that would indicate is it losing momentum? And right now we have more indicators that it is losing momentum than it isn't losing momentum. But here's some data that we're not able to look at. Hard sales data, what is actually moving? What is the attendance at the con versus just the searching? How are projects for D&D 5e and other TTRPGs funding on Kickstarter? Are they funding at a higher rate? Are they launching at a higher rate this year than last year? Patreon funding, similar concept. Are those focused within the D&D categories doing better or worse this year than last year? Dungeon Master hirings, same thing, this year versus last year. And I think that there's a lot of work you could do on YouTube viewership, because we saw that the media consumption definitely isn't going down. It is possible that general interest, which has had a lot of reasons to be going up recently, or at least a little while ago, which Zack the Bold mentions in his video, things like the D&D movie and Stranger Things mentions, well, those have fizzled out. So I do think that, to Zack the Bold's point, there are indicators that Dungeons & Dragons is indeed, at this moment, losing momentum after it had a really big spike around 2022. And that here, 3 years later, we're now starting to feel the decline of the hype. I hope this was of interest to you. If you have any questions or need for a professional marketer to help you with what you're building in the TTRPG tabletop gaming space, let me know, or follow me at Tabletop Business Masterminds. This was a really interesting question. So if you also have questions like this, just let me know, because I might just go ahead and make a video about it. All right? Y'all have a great day. Stay awesome.